Hello guys, before I start this video, this is a disclaimer that needs to be put up. I usually don't put these types of disclaimers at the beginning of my videos because I'm usually very calm and collective, but there are going to be moments in this video where either me or someone I'm going to be doing a co-op with are going to be yelling throughout this video. If you are in any way sensitive to loud noises or yelling, be sure to either go or put your volume on a place where it's as low as possible. And if you're watching this video at night and you live with other people, be sure to wear some headphones so that way the screaming in the video won't wake anybody in your house. I don't usually yell in my videos because I'm generally very calm when it comes to talking about things, but in this video, who or what I'm talking about rubs me the wrong way to the point where I can't talk about these things calmly, but if you don't mind any of that, continue on. With all that said, enjoy the video. Let's just get this over with. Just to let you know, guys, I don't like Robot Boy. Getting this out of the way real quick, so far in my Sean's Network Reviews series, I thought that the Tom and Jerry comedy show would take the spot for the worst show I would review in this series, before two other shows I would review/rewatch at one point would take that particular show's spot. Nah, that's not true anymore, as I got done reviewing Thundercat's Roar by the time that I'm writing this script, which holds the second place spot. Robot Boy now holds the second place spot until it gets pushed back to number 3 at some point. And I know for sure that if I ever, in the future, decide to make a list of the worst forgotten cartoons, this show would make the list most definitely. Probably not number 1, but instead, maybe it would be like top 3 material. But of course, as you'll see in the title of this video, I'm not doing this particular review on my own. I have someone with me that is joining this review with me today, and that guy is Jem, better known as the Lil Gem of 99. Feel free to introduce yourself, my man.
And cue in the sound of disappointment and silence. Hello, I'm the Gem of 99 and blah blah blah. You saw my name in the title of the video, so let's begin. Even though I'm not really the type of person to talk about cartoons and having an identity crisis over them because, oh my god, I can't stay sane for more than a week, I'm making the exception in this video for the fact that this show is something special for all the wrong reasons. Robot Boy.
Released in the year of 2005 in the UK and 2006 in the US and lasted for 2 seasons with 52 episodes. From what Jem has told me in calls, this series would air on US Cartoon Network at 6 a.m. in the morning at the beginning of 2006. Although, looking through the Cartoon Network schedule archives proves otherwise except for one example. And when the show was getting to the point where it was about to end, the show would air reruns around the early mornings at 8:30 a.m. in September. September is usually a point where kids go back to school, so yeah. Mommy, can I watch Robot Boy?
No, you got school tomorrow!
Although, considering how this show is, I think it's for the best that I didn't hear about this show until years later. Going into this show, I've actually never seen this series before. Maybe a few clips here and there, but other than that, I went into this series completely blind. And the overall result, well, you're here right now.
This show does technically fall under the category of being a Cartoon Network show, but not an official Cartoon Network show. Like, the show wasn't made by the official Cartoon Network studio, but it was made by Cartoon Network Europe. And it's one of the first co-productions for Cartoon Network. So, this does count a little bit, just not completely.
So, what is this show about? This show revolves around an 11-year-old kid named Tommy Turnbull. One day he wrote a letter to his favorite inventor, Professor Moshimo, and he just gave Tommy a robot that he was working on to show him ways that he could become a normal boy. despite the fact that the show wants Robot Boy to be kept a secret.
This will be a problem we'll get to in a little bit.
Alongside Tommy, there's his best friend, Gus, and Lola, who has a crush on him, and together, they all need to prevent Robot Boy from being discovered and having this secret get revealed, and preventing him from falling into the hands of Dr. Kamikaze.
Now, on paper, this premise actually does sound good, and hell, it could actually work if given to the right people. But as we'll go on to explain in this review, the show's premise is kind of generic and poorly executed, to say the least. But in practice, as the old saying goes, there's nothing new under the sun. The problem, however, is the way that the show executes it.
Now, as Jem said, the fact that a show has a cliché premise doesn't inherently make it bad, as long as you do something with it to make the show enjoyable to watch. This show does not have that. A lot like Ollie's Pack, instead of doing something with this premise, the show instead decided to paste this very bland and generic concept into practice and do nothing else with it. And instead of using its concept to its advantage with creativity and storytelling, they decided to waste it on a formulaic plot structure that will make your brain sterile even after watching a few episodes, because this show is that repetitive. And because each episode is 11 minutes instead of 22 minutes, the pacing ends up suffering as a result. Whenever the pacing isn't extremely rushed, like in The Homecoming or Small Problems, the episodes are extremely slow. Traffic Slam and iHero are the biggest examples in this regard, and each episode of this show in particular is a chore to sit through, due to the show's incredibly horrendous voice acting and the way that each episode is written.
And if that wasn't bad enough, the show has gross-out humor and outdated pop culture references, because the people who worked on the show thought they were in the late 90s. And you'd get that impression just by watching certain episodes from making jokes that wouldn't really work in late 2000s.
Restating something that I said with Ollie's Pack a few videos ago, I don't mind when cartoons try to go both ways in terms of storytelling, by doing the action sequences as well as doing the comedy approach. I love the original Teen Titans, Gravity Falls, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2012, and OKK Let's Be Heroes, because those shows are able to keep a balance between all the aspects that they want to pull off. And another example of how this could be done right is, oddly enough, My Life as a Teenage Robot. That's actually another thing that I should bring up about this show. Whenever people have some sort of discussion about this show in any kind of way, other than talking about how awful it is, or one of its only tolerable characters, one of the things that is most often brought up about this show is that it's basically Cartoon Network's My Life as a Teenage Robot. And yeah, there is some truth to that. Both shows revolve around robots trying to fit in with society, both shows have some sort of an anime influence in the storytelling, and both shows have art styles that look similar to either Dexter's Laboratory or Powerpuff Girls.
However, that's not the full truth of how the show is. Why is that? Well, let Sean put it to you like this.
After watching both shows a little bit after the other, Robot Boy is basically My Life as a Teenage Robot. However, what I mean by that is that it's basically the bad version of My Life as a Teenage Robot. Where My Life as a Teenage Robot was a fun, pleasant, and awesome show that had a ton of stakes, characters that you were able to care about, and consistent writing, Robot Boy is a bland, frustrating, and forgettable show with characters that range from being one-dimensional to being downright insufferable, with writing that is completely inconsistent.
Yeah. As Sean stated before, Robot Boy is a show that revolves around a kid trying to keep a robot a secret while fighting off a couple of villains, most notably Dr. Kamikaze, trying to capture Robot Boy for himself and take over the world.
Of course!
The problem, though, is that this show's writing is absolutely terrible. If there's one thing that we should have learned from comic books, especially with superheroes, the point of a secret identity is to never have that particular identity to get revealed to anyone, right? Well, this show has no f***ing clue on what the concept of a secret identity is. I mean, for God's sakes, There are so many episodes that I could go on where you would see Tommy trying to keep Robot Boy a secret by turning him off or having him hide under the backpack, and then there are other episodes where you see him and plain view where he's playing with Robot Boy, Gus, and Lola in the middle of a park and the beach! I mean, seriously, guys, how do you not understand? How do you not got that memo that he should be a secret and then do shit like this with Robot Boy being in plain sight where anyone could see and be like, oh my god, a robot is actually flying! These people are just as competent as the idiots that worked on The Room. You know the one I'm talking about, Tommy Wiseau. This show is tearing me apart, Sean!
Calm down, Jem. Calm down. We'll get to that shortly. Anyways, you remember that one particular episode of Ollie's Pack that I talked about in my review on that show, We're in the Band? Which had Ollie, Cleo, and Bernie show pom-pom monsters in front of a crowd of people at a school concert, only for a later episode, The Ollie's Files, to act as if it's no big deal for monsters to be exposed to the public. Or when I pointed out that one episode had Ollie learning that he shouldn't use his monster pack unless it's for emergencies, only for the very next episode to have him misuse it again. That's basically what Robot Boy does, except this show does this constantly.
In nearly every single episode of the show, at one moment, the show has Robot Boy get revealed to the public multiple times, to the point where the show feels incredibly broken. Then the next second, the characters would preach about how, oh, Robot Boy needs to be kept a secret. We can't have him out of my backpack because Professor Mashimo tasked me to keep him away to the public. But again, as I've stated, the show does not understand the concept of secret identity, and we would get quite a few episodes where Tommy just shows Robot Boy out into the public eye because these people completely forget the memo. Because the show constantly forgets that Robot Boy is supposed to be kept a secret, and we get quite a few episodes where we see him out where anybody could see him. One of the big examples of this is on the episode Robot Boy's 15 Minutes. In that episode, Robot Boy becomes internet famous, but the suspension of disbelief goes beyond just that. 2 episodes have Robot Boy activated in front of Donnie. 2 episodes have Robot Boy become known to the FBI and the freaking US government. 2 episodes have Robot Boy get discovered and is being hunted by one of his teachers. And there was that one episode where he gets revealed to Gus's parents. And while yes, the episode does state that his parents don't have any experience with technology because they're Amish, it was further showing just how broken one of the show's rules was getting. And it just goes on like that for 2 seasons. And that's not even mentioning some of the other ones, like the episode Brother Jorn, I think that's how you say it. Dr. Mashimo revealed a prototype that looks like Robot Boy to the public. And there was this one episode called Knockoffs, where it has the cashier, who is oddly a parody of that loser from Napoleon Dynamite. But anyways, he gets to make knockoff versions of Robot Boy and calls them Robo Boy and actually sells them to the public where anyone could buy them for God knows how much. Seriously, people! Why do you bother establishing the rules when you're not even gonna follow through and stay consistent on the world building you're making?
Okay, while Jem is wrecking everything in his room, let me continue discussing this problem by talking about another episode that Jem doesn't know about. By far the worst example in this regard is the episode Everybody Loves Grandma, because of the fact that in the episode, not only is Robot Boy revealed to Tommy's grandma with no self-awareness whatsoever, but he even has him activated in front of his entire family at the beach with no raised eyebrows whatsoever. Even though this show specifically set up that Tommy needs to keep Robot Boy a secret. But the factor of this show doing this whole thing, where Robot Boy either gets exposed to the public, or someone in his family or school finds out about Robot Boy, but then it goes back to preaching about how he needs to be kept a secret, just screams out loud about how fundamentally broken this show is. Was each episode only written in one draft, or did each episode bring in different writers that have good memory about how this show's rules work, but then brought in a different writer for the next episode that doesn't know about how Robot Boy is supposed to be kept a secret, and then not look over it and notice these inconsistencies?
And hey, you wanna know why that is?
Why is that?
Because they were written by a bunch of brain-dead monkeys who have a shorter attention span than Dory from Finding Nemo. And speaking of fishes, I think it's about time for me to go out fishing, because when I catch these people, I'm gonna take them!
Hey guys, Sean S. with an intermission here. That piece of anger that you just saw was quite a ride for you guys to be able to handle in particular, wasn't it? There's a reason as to why I put an anger disclaimer at the beginning of this video, as well as my review on Monster Family, because listening to the audio for this review actually made myself dizzy from how heated it got. I got so angry, in fact, that Jack81, someone that did often scream in his own videos, don't worry, we're cool with each other now, asked me if I was doing okay because of how much I screamed in that particular video, and I of course replied to him saying that I'm doing okay and that there were just a lot of things that I needed to get off my chest about that film. And if you thought that I was already angry with my Monster Family review, trust me, that was just the appetizer for this video. And just to let you all in a little something, this isn't going to be the only time when me and Jem will be getting angry in this video. We've yet to have gotten to the parts of the video where I start getting angry, because there are just so many things in this show that rub me the wrong way on a personal level, including the fact that this show tests my comfort because of how borderline disgusting this show gets. But, those things are for much later in the video, so for now, I'm going to give you guys an update for my videos. After this video, I'm going to be taking a bit of a break to relax, as this video was in production for more than a while now. Me and Jem actually got the script done in November 2021, and he wasn't free to be able to record the lines for the video until December 2022. And I've been working on this video since late February. But I've been working on this video at my own pace, due to me being anxious because of how long we talked about this show for. And due to how incredibly draining that working on my review of Code Lyoko was, both editing the entire video and rendering it, since I had to render it twice because the audio in the first version was out of sync, I started becoming much more slow and got easily burned out for the day, that I would take a break after getting that particular segment done, and considering how slow I am personally, I get burned out more than most other people. And due to how much I had on my plate for this video, I was actually half tempted to give some segments of the video to another person to edit, but then thought to myself that it wouldn't be a good idea because I was skeptical about how that person's editing skills would be, and thought about how jarring it would come off as. So I decided to persevere throughout this video. I got anxious because by the time that I got done editing the previous segment of the video, there was still an hour worth of the video left, but I soon calmed down and decided to focus on the audio that I was editing and put the length of how much I had left to the side. Although, I do know for sure that I am going to be giving some of my other videos to some other people to edit, and basically give them unlimited time because I do know how long it takes to make a video, which is basically one of the reasons why I created the spin-off series Sean's Yearly Reviews, since movies are generally easier to talk about than shows, and the pages for those particular scripts would be at most 6 or 8 pages long, basically to talk about something easier than an entire series and give out some filler content that would be easier to give to an editor than a review of a show that has multiple hours to its name. And also, another reason as to why I ended up delaying this review was because I was asked by a few people to make some artwork for them because they either didn't have very many avatar stills or they were trying to move on from a previous artist of theirs who got themselves into controversy. And when I get focused on one thing, it makes it very difficult for me to multitask. And I was working on some Sean's Yearly Review episode scripts. The only other reviews in which I do know that I'm going to edit on my own are my reviews on the Teacher's Pet movie, Rock Dog, and 9. Not only because those are very short episodes, but I have a joke in my Teacher's Pet movie review that I'm going to be keeping a surprise. Rock Dog once again is going to be relatively short, and my 9 review is going to be drastically short, only being 4 pages long, and it'll be able to be done in no time. Anyways, I rambled enough. Jem did want me to put in something to give you guys a break, so I thought about doing an intermission for you all. Anyways, with all that rambling aside, let's get back to the video. Are you finished, Jim?
Yeah, I tend to burst out in anger when I see bullshit writing like this, and I think I've released just enough of my energy to be zapped now.
Okay then, can we move on and do it gently?
Yeah. Okay. And speaking of the concept of this show, on paper, the show honestly did have a lot of potential, and maybe it could have been something special and worth watching. But the show does absolutely nothing with it. I mean, yes, the concept of the show is pretty cliche. Basically, it's what you'd get if you combined Pinocchio, Astro Boy, Mega Man, especially the color scheme, Dexter's Laboratory to some extent, and My Life as a Teenage Robot in a blender. Mix it up and you get Robot Boy. And it's not a very good smoothie when you mix all of them together.
If you guys recall, one show that I liked that I also reviewed, Teacher's Pet, was a show that had concepts that had been done before. Character wants to be a real boy, the male kid that has a crush on one of the other female students but is nervous around them and doesn't admit that they like them yet, and hiding that character's secret identity, whether they were an alien, animal, or whatever. But what works with that show is that while on paper it's generic and sounds bland, it had a ton of creativity and everything else, and was so wacky that it made that show tons of fun.
And what does Robot Boy have? Well, it has action sequences with him beating up villains and other baddies. I guess that's something?
But that particular aspect of this show is nothing special. Thundercats Roar also had entertaining action sequences, but that was a show that I didn't like either. Other than that particular aspect that I like in this show, a small amount of episodes that I like, and two of the only likable and interesting characters in this show.
If you ignore all of the negative and frustrating aspects of the show that we will get into in a little bit, the show still doesn't work for one reason and one reason only. Most of these episodes are either bland, boring, weird, and horrible!
Yeah, what Jem said. And not just that, but in a similar way that Ollie's Pack was, when the show isn't going out of its way to try and infuriate and baffle you, the incredibly basic way that the backgrounds are, and generic and formulaic plotlines that this show creates, makes this show become subpar at best. While yes, the concept of this show is interesting and could have been 22 minutes, had a 3-act commercial break, and could have had character development and arcs, similarly to Ollie's Pack, it's entirely wasted on a formulaic plot structure, and it's inconsistent in how it's trying to set up its continuity and rules. However, it's worse with Robot Boy because its inconsistency even expands to the concept. Being serious right now, what is this show even trying to be about? Yes, the show is about Tommy Turnbull trying to keep Robot Boy a secret. However, despite the fact that Dr. Moshimo wants Tommy to keep him a secret, he also wants Tommy to teach Robot Boy about how to be a real boy and live among them.
Okay, serious question to Dr. Moshimo right now. If you didn't want Robot Boy to be revealed into the public, why are you putting him into a situation where he could definitely be put into the wrong hands? Especially when you have him under the protection of a mere child. I don't even care if he's your fan. Have him be the one to take care of Robot Boy. Tommy is a kid. Children are known to be a lot more defenseless than adults are. Not all kids, but most kids are not nearly as capable as adults are. Now yes, Tommy Turnbull is one of the protagonists of the show. But what is Tommy going to do to keep Robot Boy out of Dr. Kamikaze's hands? He doesn't even know about Tommy until he wrote a letter to him. And if all of these episodes made it abundantly clear, Dr. Kamikaze knows that Tommy has Robot Boy, constantly makes plans to lie to Robot Boy, send invitations, gifts, anything you could think of all the time, and wouldn't stop until he gets Robot Boy. So what is even the point of having Tommy take care of Robot Boy when Dr. Kamikaze and all of these other villains try to catch him by any means necessary? When Dr. Moshimo could have just kept Robot Boy all to himself. And what's really weird is the fact that Robot Boy is pretty capable of defending himself, defeating all of these villains, and he could have just stayed with Dr. Mishimo as like a protector or something.
Seriously, this show makes no sense.
I agree, Jem. Like, seriously, Dr. Moshimo is known to the public and is very popular. I'm pretty sure that Tommy isn't the only one that wrote a letter to him saying that they're a big fan of Moshimo and that they're excited for his next project. And if that was the case, Moshimo, out of all people that wrote to you saying that they're a big fan of you, why did you pick Tommy out of all of them? You have a lot of others around you, particularly your wife Mew Mew, and an entire security system that is able to keep out villains from being able to go in and capture Robot Boy and Robot Girl. And wouldn't you want someone who is much more strong, is older, knows how to keep them hidden, and is in a condition where they have personal space, and is able to flawlessly keep Robot Boy in the shadows and away from the public? And Dr. Moshimo's motivation for why he wanted Tommy to keep an eye on Robot Boy makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. He sent Robot Boy to Tommy to teach him how to be a real boy, but how can he learn how to be a real boy if he still can't be revealed to the public? This premise might work if they gave Robot Boy a skin suit and had him be able to go to school with Tommy, Gus, and Lola, like Teacher's Pet was able to do. But like the rest of the show, this particular element of the show makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, and just makes the overall show completely inconsistent.
Yeah, you said that already. Now, I understand that the show is episodic, and it doesn't exactly have a huge storyline with a lot of plot details that would build up to something, but do you want to know what other shows were episodic and didn't have to follow a big storyline? The early seasons of Fairly Odd Parents and Jimmy Neutron. But they were able to keep what they set up consistently, for the most part. Their concepts didn't have any gaping holes in them, and it didn't leave us with several questions that we still want to know to this day.
I thought that you said that you didn't watch cartoons before, Jem.
I watched a few cartoons back then when I was a dumb clueless kid, but nowadays I don't watch anything on TV today like you do.
Okay, but back on topic. The writing in Robot Boy is on par with Fairly Odd Parents Season 10, something that goes in circles with what it sets up and establishes, to the point of being fundamentally broken. But even looking past the factor of this show throwing its rules out the window, the writing in this show falls apart for multiple reasons. The show literally uses a very despicable character, that we'll get to, as a plot device most of the time, where he is the reason why Robot Boy ends up getting captured a lot. The show fails to establish certain things on screen, the biggest example being in Robot Girl, where not only me, but Jem would go ahead and question, how does Robot Girl know about Dr. Kamikaze?
The show also makes its characters incredibly unsympathetic whenever that character does something really stupid and downright heinous at times. But there were certain moments where the show actually wants us to feel sorry for them, and it really doesn't work.
The episode Constabot is manipulation in the form of an episode. This show right here seriously wants us to feel sorry for Gus, whom we'll get to in a bit. Despite the fact that literally at the start of the episode, he was bragging about the fact that he won a Frisbee game right in front of Tommy and Robot Boy's faces, right before Tommy and Robot Boy laughed at the fact that Gus got hit in the head by it.
Writing 101. If you want us, the audience, to sympathize with Gus, you can't have him be annoying right before getting hit in the head with a freaking Frisbee. Because not only is he a piece of shit in general, but that moment comes across as a really manipulative way to have us feel sorry for him. I've said this before in my review of Home on the Rage, and I'll say it here. Why should I feel sorry for this character when that said character is nothing but an annoying, hypocritical, backstabbing wanksta kid?
He is such an irredeemable piece of garbage that I'm getting mad just by even describing what he does in certain episodes. And I don't believe for a microsecond that Gus was possessed in the Curse of Truckenstein. I believe that Gus knew for every single second about what he was doing, because in one part, he was concerned about the monster truck running over Tommy and Lola before supposedly being snapped out of being possessed. And because he does stuff like this in nearly every single episode. But if Gus really was possessed throughout the episode, the show sure did a very poor job at showing it throughout this episode. This show also has a serious problem with all of its implications and what it's conveying.
One of which is a Grossout angle.
But we'll get to that in due time. And what I'm talking about, of course, is how this show portrays family issues and friendship. Not gonna lie right now, guys, when I started binge watching all of the episodes of this show, when it came to the first few episodes, the show wasn't getting me in too much of a fired up mood. The show at most used Gus as a plot device as the reason why Robot Boy gets captured by Kamikaze and why others around him get into trouble, and I found the show to be really boring. Not Tom and Jerry comedy show levels of dull, but up there as the most bored that I've been with any show I reviewed and will review in this series. This includes Alvin and the Chipmunks 2015 and Camp Coral. However, my tune on this show completely changed when I got around to watching episodes like Cleaning Day and Constabat. My reaction went from being bored to being enraged.
Enraged, huh? Now who's the one that should calm down, huh?
One of the reasons is because of Gus, of course, but what also disgusts me about this show is how it handles family and friendship. The friendship side of things is because of Gus's entire existence, and how this show portrays family. The obvious family members that are being absolutely horrible towards the child is Gus's family members, but they are absolutely tame in comparison to Tommy's family members, let me tell you. Because Gus's parents at least look after him, and despite the fact that they don't show happiness, they care about his safety and him needing to be home and be in bed. Literally the only tolerable one of the three of Tommy's family members is Debbie Turnbull. Because she at least has common sense, she treats both of the kids at the house fairly, most of the time, and while her voice is rather bland, she doesn't have a grating voice or personality that makes certain episodes a chore to sit through.
Which is more than you can say with just about everyone in this terrible show.
Tommy's two other family members are just god-awful! Because one of them constantly abuses his own brother, even to a point where in one episode, he literally admits out loud that he bullies his own brother and gives swirlies to him, while the other is completely neglectful and plays the parental favoritism game constantly, and he seriously glosses over the fact that Donnie was beating up his own brother in one episode, and seriously enabled him doing that in that particular episode.
Jeez, and I thought my family was bad.
I really do hope that this show did this stuff by accident and that it doesn't actually think that family members doing this stuff to the child is alright, because if you've been through all the stuff that Tommy has been through in this show, constantly getting beaten up by your own brother or stepbrother, feeling like you're alone in life because one of the parents doesn't care about what's happening to you, or many other things, this stuff is seriously triggering and offensive, and the fact that this show doesn't see the problem with these things is just wrong on so many levels. Especially when all of them, including Debbie in the episode Cleaning Day, seem to not have any respect towards Tommy's personal space or property whatsoever. To a point where it makes me hope that either Tommy is taken by Debbie away from these two, and Debbie and Dwight, Tommy's neglectful father, are divorced, Donnie is signed up for military school, or Tommy is flat out taken away by Child Protective Services and given a better life from his family members.
Which leads us into another aspect that makes the show just downright awful, which is the characters. If they were just bland and forgettable, didn't have a personality, were just one-dimensional, and so on, that would be one thing.
And it might have just led to me saying that this show is just a boring, subpar show, similar to shows like Alvin and the Chipmunks 2015 and My Night and Me, but that is definitely not the case whatsoever. There are some characters that do fit into this category, but the characters in this show range from being as bland and dry as a pancake without syrup, to being annoying and downright insufferable.
Yeah, Sean, but I'd argue and say that annoying and insufferable words are not enough to describe these people. Starting out with the least bad characters first, one of the main characters is Tommy. He is very dull. He pretty much comes across as your typical kid who just so happens to be a fan of Dr. Mishimo and is kind of good with computers. Just a blank slate for all of us to see ourselves relating to him. Though, considering the stuff that he actually goes through in this show, you wouldn't be able to see yourself as him. He's pretty much just Arnold from Hey Arnold, if he had less personality, charm, and intelligence with him. And boy, let me tell you, some episodes, he can be really stupid. he would be smart in one episode and would be downright stupid in the next.
Although, even though I do find him bland, by default, he's one of the only tolerable characters in this show because of how much he has to put up with. Having a parasite of a friend treating you like garbage, 2 out of 3 of your family members treating you horribly, and being put in a situation where you might have 2 bad guys getting a hold of something you were put in charge of, can have very long-lasting effects on you, especially at a young age. It gets up to a point where I feel sorry for him.
You may feel that way about him, Sean, but because he's stupid and inconsistent, he ain't getting simpy from me. No, sir. The main character of which the show is named after, Robot Boy, he is also one of the only tolerable characters, and that's putting it mildly. Mainly because, even though he speaks like a brain-dead retard who doesn't know English correctly, and Robot Girl also suffers from this as well, Robot Boy is, at the very least, not annoying. And he did have some potential for character growth throughout the entire show, and it could have been done considering how much Robot Boy's like, I want to be real boy. Robot Boy want be real. Now you understand why I threw in Pinocchio in the blender.
In a similar way that Spot from Teacher's Pet had a large amount of character growth, it was just completely thrown out the window here because of how much this show's execution doesn't make any sense.
I guess dogs in the cartoon universe are smarter than robots. I don't know, it's really stupid. There's also this other main character named Lola. She is also very dull. Her voice is kind of mismatched if I'm honest. She kind of looks like a rejected Powerpuff Girl, and there's not much I could really say about her. Because most of the time, she's just there and doesn't do nearly as much stuff as Tommy and Gus, despite the fact that she's supposedly rich and has a father who's like an ambassador if I'm not mistaken. Whenever Lola and Tommy are together, it's mostly done to show that she has a crush on Tommy. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But now, let's get into the really bad and insufferable characters. And this character in particular sticks out like a huge sore thumb compared to Tommy and Lola. I speak none other than Gus Turner.
I hate Gus. I'm not even going to hold my feelings back. I absolutely hate this character with every fiber of my being.
Let it out, Shawnee, just let it out. I'm too exhausted to even yell at this point.
Definitely not the worst character in all of television or media, but he's one of, if not the worst child characters that I've ever seen in animation, and definitely holds a spot for being the worst out of all the characters of the shows that I have and will review in Sean's network reviews, without question. I thought that Rudy from Kuku Harajuku, Lionel from Thundercats Roar, Jerry, Spike and the owners from the Tom and Jerry Comedy Show, and Ollie Allen from Ollie's Pack were bad, but oh god no, those characters don't hold a candle or even come close to the amount of bad that Gus Turner from this show holds. This is a showcase of how a character could go wrong. Gus has 4 very major problems that, while they are simple, they make him downright insufferable to be within miles of. His voice, his general lack of care towards anyone else but himself, his infuriating stupidity, and how absolutely scummy he is towards Tommy and to the world around him.
Let me say this. And speaking about the voice, Gus sounds like Eric Cartman trying to act like he's some sort of gangsta in the hood shooting Crips and Bloods, and it's really annoying.
In every single episode, and I mean this with no exaggeration, every single episode, Gus either says something stupid at the worst possible moments, his ego gets so large that I get annoyed just by watching him on screen, and the ways that he treats Tommy in this show is absolutely despicable. This show likes to claim that these 2 characters are supposed to be best friends, but from seeing their reactions on screen towards each other a lot of the time, these 2 are definitely not friends. A lot of their reactions consist of Tommy either being irritated by Gus and him just taking it like a piece of wood that can't defend itself, while Gus completely takes advantage of him, gets himself and Tommy into hot water, and generally treats Tommy absolutely horribly.
Wow, Sean, you don't have a lot of gas in your tank to light a fire like me, don't you?
Who do you think I am, Jem? The mysterious Mr. Enter?
Never mind. Forget what I said.
This show has the same idea of friendship that the movie Reanimated had, where it portrayed two friends as one being absolutely horrible, while the other is a blank slate that gets pushed around and they just take it. And that particularly horrible friend does such bad things throughout the product that you just question, why doesn't the other character just stop being friends with that guy, when throughout the entire series, Gus shows that he's not gonna clean up his act at all?
Gus is pretty much the show's equivalent of the Scrappy-Doo character from the Scooby-Doo shows, where I've never seen anyone that likes him before. Even those that actually like the show for some reason. They have all said that Gus is like the worst part of the whole show. Not even the characters within the universe of the show seem to tolerate him at all. We would see them get annoyed and frustrated with him, they would beat him up whenever he does something stupid and downright scummy, and most of the conflicts in the show happens because of his absolute stupidity, his insatiable greed for money, general reckless behavior, and just downright being a complete sociopath.
But in all honesty, I would rather put up with Scrappy-Doo than this jerk, because at least Scrappy-Doo has good intent, that being to beat up whatever monster that tries to mess with the Mystery Inc. gang. Gus doesn't even have that. Don't believe me? Well, I already brought up the episode Constabat, where he acts incredibly insufferable towards Tommy and Robot Boy just because they laughed at him when getting hit in the head with a frisbee, even though he was being incredibly annoying right before that happened to him, which makes that episode come off as incredibly manipulative. But the issues go beyond that. In the 6th episode, Kurt's Father, he laughs at Tommy when getting pranked by Kurt, to a point where Tommy even says that Kurt acts like a better friend than Gus. And when Kurt starts being buddies with Tommy, and they basically split in the episode, right at the end when Gus and Tommy get back together, Gus proves himself to be an absolute hypocrite, basically implying that Gus is allowed to laugh at his friend, but when it's the other way around, it's all of a sudden a bad thing.
That's saying something when you know you're an awful friend when the main bullies at school are not nearly as horrible and annoying as Gus. What does that say? What does that say about this insufferable kid?
Seriously, when both of them split apart in that episode, my first thought shouldn't be, good. He doesn't deserve to have any friends because of the way that he treats them.
In the episode I Want That Toy, he literally starts out by stealing money directly out of Tommy's hands because he wanted the extra money for a talking toy, even though Tommy was wanting to use that money to give Robot Boy a toy of his own. And when Tommy gets accused of stealing one of the toys from the toy store, even though he was bringing a toy with him, he doesn't even stand up for his friend. And Tommy wrongfully gets in trouble, and in one scene where we see Gus and Lola come to help break Tommy out of the house while he's grounded, Gus doesn't even feel any sort of guilt for the fact that he got him in trouble in the first place, as he didn't even stand up for him. And all he cares about throughout the rest of this stupid episode is the toy he got. Tommy, if you can answer me this question, why were you friends with this kid again?
The 8th episode, sister episode, Sweet Revenge, has him destroying a good amount of the candy stores around San Francisco with Robot Boy, just for a candy bar. He goes through Tommy's backpack to eat a Pez dispenser thing that he wanted to keep in mint condition, and Tommy specifically told him not to do that in A Tale of Two Geniuses. He almost gets Tommy killed in the Attack of the Killer G-Men. He threatens to blackmail Tommy with the notion that he would tell Bambi that he has a crush on her if he doesn't join him in wrestling with Gus, and the list just goes on and on and on.
Again, this begs an answer, and I'll ask again. Why were you friends with this kid? Why?
Like, seriously, whenever Gus isn't being incredibly scummy towards Tommy, whom the show constantly lets you know is, and I'm going to say this again, Tommy's best friend, he isn't the type of character that, while dumb, has a lovable personality. He's instead the type of character that is completely narcissistic to a point of being infuriating. One half of his character has the exact same issue as Ollie Allen from Ollie's Pack, where he does horrible things and he knows what he's doing, except Gus doesn't even have an excuse to be this horrible, while the other half is basically Patrick Starr. No, not the Patrick Star from the early and recent seasons of SpongeBob, where he has a dumb but lovable personality. I'm talking about the mid-seasons of SpongeBob, where he was not only a jerk, but was also dumber and completely arrogant.
You know, this brings me an important question. What level from is he spawned after?
Maybe it has something to do with his parents. However, that can't be true because despite the ways that they treat Gus, it's shown that Gus has a pretty decent life. Considering the fact that they only really have him come back to the house during the evening to go to bed, and he has 2 friends that he hangs out with, and everyone around him lets him eat whatever he wants. He has all of these things in his life. Nothing that has anything to do with something traumatic, and unlike Tommy, he doesn't have a ton of bad things piled onto him. And yet, Gus still treats everyone as bad as possible, especially Tommy.
Man, Sean, the show just keeps finding ways to make Gus more and more unlikable. It almost makes me wonder if the people who are behind the show were deliberately creating such an unlikable character just to troll with the kids that actually watch the show.
And do you want to know what makes Gus even worse? Unlike Donnie, Kurt, and many of the villains that try to get a hold of Robot Boy, Gus is not supposed to be seen as a bully or villain. He is supposed to be seen as the comic relief. Someone that you're not supposed to detest, and is one of the characters that is supposed to be seen as one of the heroes, but in actuality, he acts like a villain. Yeah, Donnie does do worse things, and trust me, we'll be getting to him in a bit. Donnie is better than Gus because he isn't supposed to be seen as one of the protagonists. He is at least supposed to be seen as a threat for Tommy to win against. Even though, yes, Donnie is also terrible, especially because a certain character enables him to do these terrible things.
And Gus doesn't. He really doesn't. So there's no excuse. No fucking excuse.
While I was watching most of the episodes of this show, I would question, why does Gus exist in this show, and why does Tommy continue to be friends with him, until I got my answer in the form of an episode. In the episode Destroy All Robots, Tommy even questions why he and Gus continue to be friends, and Gus answers him by saying, to make things interesting by adding conflict.
No. I call bull on that excuse right there. You can add conflict without making one of your main characters as horrible as possible. You could have added bullies, and giving characters like Gus some redeemable qualities to him. That's not someone making a bad mistake. That's just writing in general.
The latter is the reason why Darkwing Duck and Mau Mau are both interesting and aren't unlikable. That's what I'm planning to do with some stories/projects of mine, and just like what I said towards Thundercat's Roar, just because you have your character question why they continue to be friends with the parasite of a friend, that doesn't make any of the issues go away. It's a, what I'm doing is wrong, I know it's wrong, but I'm gonna do it anyway scenario. But let's move on from Gus, and let's get into another group of characters that I cannot stand, and that is Tommy's family members. Getting this out of the way right now, of these characters, the only one that I find tolerable is Debbie Turnbull, because she at least makes an attempt to be a good mother to Tommy and Donnie, is fair towards both of them, and actually has common sense. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Debbie was an influence on Nicole Watterson from The Amazing World of Gumball, because of her mix of being nice and furious. I can't stand the other two, though. Starting out with Donnie Turnbull. He is absolutely abusive, without a doubt. Unlike the father, I'll give this show some credit in that it does see that what Donnie does as a problem, as threatening music does play every single time he appears on screen, but that does not make what Donnie does okay at all. In one of the first episodes of the series, Cleaning Day, he literally admits out loud that he likes to bully his own brother by saying, "Nobody gives my brother swirlies but me," without self-awareness of how bad these implications are.
So in other words, he's a stereotypical big bully brother with little to no charm or personality. He makes Kevin from Ed, Edd and Eddy look three-dimensional.
In Brother, he constantly roughhouses with Tommy when Tommy is trying to get ready to go into the car, and the worst of them all is the Donnie-nator, where it's shown that at the beginning of the episode that while Tommy was taking a shower, Donnie invaded Tommy's personal space by going into his room, messing with his toys/property, and putting them in a shredder outside.
Seriously? Seriously? As if Gus wasn't enough to give Tommy such a terrible time in most of these episodes, the show seriously has a nasty habit of bringing such terrible people to Tommy.
Yep. And when his arm is broken, while he has a strong robot arm, he causes $1 million damages to a bunch of cars, and he doesn't even get any sort of comeuppance for doing so. And yeah, that's actually something else that I should also bring up about Donnie that makes him even worse with everything that he does. He does horrible things, however, he doesn't even get punished for anything that he does. The most that happens in these episodes is that he is scolded at by Debbie, or is scared and intimidated by Robot Boy, and that is literally it. At every other point, a certain character is constantly enabling his awful behavior, and that certain character constantly plays the parental favoritism game. The episodes that I hate the most are Underwater and Party Out of Bounds, because this problem is completely on full display. Donnie, in one of these episodes, uses Robot Boy as bait without Tommy's consent, and the father literally breaks the two apart from fighting without hearing Tommy's side of the story. And in the other, Donnie destroys the entire house and makes a complete mess, but the father congratulates him in the end.
What kind of sick, twisted, mean-spirited world is this?
Apparently the kind that has the same morality as Chicken Little. This heavily implies that Donnie can make a mess of the entire house without getting into deep trouble, yet Tommy can't do the same thing without getting scolded at or grounded. Which leads me into talking about the worst character in Tommy's family, which is his father, Dwight. And I absolutely despise him. He's not the worst character in all of media. I already talked about how Gus is the worst character out of all the shows that I reviewed in Sean's Network reviews so far, but Dwight is definitely one of the worst parental figures that I've ever seen. He would definitely be in the top 3 for sure, behind Buck Cluck from Chicken Little and Ivan's dad from Ivan the Incredible. Why is that? Well, I'm going to put it in a few words. He constantly plays the parental favoritism game. And this show sees absolutely nothing wrong with it, to a point where, because of him, I think that Tommy should be taken away by Child Protective Services and be given a better life. In every episode, and I mean this with no exaggeration, he does not care a single bit about Tommy whatsoever, with the exception of the ending of Underwater, and up until the ending of Racer Zero. I can't think of a single moment where Dwight cared about Tommy or had a positive interaction with him. Most of their interactions involve him scolding Tommy for, quote, not being manly, not doing simple requests that Tommy asked him to do, the dad putting him into dangerous situations, and constantly picking Donnie over him. And this guy is a massive hypocrite for the purpose of preferring Donnie over him.
Remember, kids, always honor and cherish your family, even if they show no concern at the sight of you hanging for dear life at a mountain cliff. Family morality is this whole family love thing could go itself.
In the episode that Jem mentioned a little bit ago, I Want That Toy, he grounds Tommy for something that he didn't even do because it's his words against the guards. Yet in the other episode that I mentioned a bit ago, Party Out of Bounds, he doesn't ground Donnie for the entire house being a mess, even though he knows for every single moment that Donnie was responsible for the house being a mess, but he glosses over it because of his bias for Donnie. This parental favoritism garbage is even a problem in one of my favorite episodes of the show, Racer Zero. That episode might have been my favorite episode, but that god-awful ending brought it down to a point of being pushed out of being my favorite. And the fact that he actually enables the fact that Donnie constantly beats Tommy up legitimately fires me up, to a point where I don't believe that this guy should have any more children if this is the way that he's going to treat one of them, while putting the other on a pedestal. And considering the way that he treats children, makes me fear of how he treated Tommy and Donnie as babies or even toddlers, because this stuff is downright triggering, especially if you've been through these things before.
Actually, now that you mention it, Sean, I'm kinda curious. Do you think that dad force-fed Donnie all the milk and left Tommy with nothing but his mother to feed him?
That is a high possibility because of how much he doesn't care for Tommy. Another one of my least favorite episodes of the show is Footbrawl, not only for that really disgusting ending, and it literally has every single problem with the show, but also the dad is just awful in the episode because all he cares about is winning the game and nothing else. Not even caring about the safety of the children playing the game.
The soccer mom side is really strong with this one for a guy who's supposedly a manly man.
He's a man. Such a man.
Are you a wrestling fan, Sean?
No, but I did hear that song in one of T-Bone 2004's commentaries.
Oh. Okay then, moving on.
His worst appearance, though, is Mancation, because of one scene in particular that makes him downright irredeemable. In one sequence, he has Tommy and Donnie climb up a mountain, and Tommy ends up holding on for dear life, as he starts to lose his grip on the side of that mountain. And what the dad does is that instead of going and saving his life, or being concerned for his son's safety, he scolds Tommy for, and I quote, acting like a baby and attracting a creature
That doesn't even exist!
And throughout the rest of that episode, he's more concerned with the fact that Tommy attracted a creature that doesn't even exist than the fact that he literally almost got Tommy killed. And he literally forgets Tommy in the end of the episode when running into the car and going home, which just cements how horrible he is in the episode.
Father of the century, ladies and gentlemen!
As for the side characters, I just don't care about them that much. Dr. Moshimo and Mew Mew are just there. They only really pop up on screen to tell Tommy about a new upgrade that Robot Boy has or what have you. Although, considering how insufferable most of these characters are, they are probably some of the better characters in this show because Dr. Moshimo doesn't have grating voice acting, and Mew Mew is a mostly silent character throughout the show, to a point where I wouldn't have minded if we saw these two as the main characters instead, primarily because of how bad the voice acting is in this show.
You would think that Dr. Mishimo would be important since, I remind all of you, he's the one who built Robot Boy and made the dumb decision to have his oh-so-greatest creation at the hands of a, once again,
Mere child!
And Mew Mew, on the other hand, is... yeah, she's just there.
I don't remember anything about any of the teachers, except for the gym teacher, because of how over-the-top she is. And the secretary from the episode Destroy All Robots, because the episode really triggers me, and that is the biggest example about how the show doesn't understand the concept of personal space. The other teachers, I don't remember anything about. And I'm not gonna lie, the villains in the show are really good, which is what I would have said, but their voices are just grating.
I kinda disagree with you on that, Sean. Although I will say that even if the villains had potential, it's kinda hard to take them seriously when they either have voices with really thick accents or just terrible voices in general.
Which reminds me to say this, the voice acting in this show is just dreadful. Whenever the voice actors aren't putting on forced accents and trying way too hard to sound intimidating and funny, I get the impression that none of the voice actors sound like they even want to be there. Tommy sounds bland, Lola is completely mismatched, not sounding like a kid but instead an adult. Debbie sounds like the voice actor is just phoning it in, and Gus sounds eerily similar to Cartman from South Park. No joke, I needed to look up the voice actor for him to see if Cartman and Gus didn't have the same voice actor. Not only that, but Gus's voice just gets grating, being at its absolute worst in the episode that I mentioned a little bit ago, The Curse of Truckenstein.
Yeah, Sean, I already said that Gus's voice was bad. And of course, it wasn't done by the same voice actors. You really think that the creators of South Park would seriously devote their times voicing such an awful character at a show like this?
However, I think that the villains have this voice acting problem the worst out of all the characters in this show. Almost all of them have the problem where they try way too hard, or have very forced accents that just sound grating on the ears. The only ones that I find tolerable are Princess Justine, but she only appears in one episode and I only remember her because that episode also triggers me, and Special Agent. But everyone else just tries way too hard to sound intimidating that just comes off as unnatural and forced. All of the other villains in this show have the exact same problems as Vendetta from Making Fiends, where they all force in their accents, except this show does this even worse because this problem applies to multiple villains and not just one. The worst of them all is Dr. Kamikaze and Constantine because of how not only grating they sound, but also for a good majority of the series, they are always the villains in every episode, making them overstay their welcome to a point where it becomes a breath of fresh air when the other villains get the spotlight. They had potential to be entertaining villains, but they just became extremely obnoxious because of their voices, similarly to Whitey from 8 Crazy Nights, and they could also come off as very stereotypical for obvious reasons. Bjorn is not any better. The voice actor for him tried so hard to emphasize the fact that he's snooty that it just makes him very obnoxious. Vance Cosgrove is pretty much the same. The voice actor tried so hard to come off as mysterious and so much of a detective that it just comes off as really forced. And with Klaus von Affekengale and Ludwig, there is no other way around this. They are literally the exact same characters as Dr. Kamikaze and Constantine, and they are not subtle about it whatsoever. As Ludwig is literally Constantine, except he doesn't talk, and Klaus von Affekengale is Dr. Kamikaze, except a little younger. To a point where I'm not even joking, there are some episodes where these four unite to capture Robot Boy. While I'm glad that Ludwig doesn't talk, Klaus von Affekengale does, and he sounds just as awful as the other villains. I think they were trying to have him do an impression of Peter Lorre, but he just doesn't have the same mannerisms as him, so he just ends up sounding very scratchy as opposed to having charm.
So to put it bluntly, the voice acting of these guys range from either being ear-piercingly annoying to stereotypically racist to having really heavy accents with broken English, or to just be flat-out strange.
As for the animation, since we've yet to talk about that, what do I think about the animation? Well, I'll give it this. It's better than the animation in other shows I reviewed and will review so far, like the Tom and Jerry comedy show, Thundercats Roar, and even Camp Coral, as well as Kuku Harajuku, at least the first season, since I've yet to watch all the episodes of seasons 2 and 3. But that's the most that I could really say about the animation in this show. Don't get me wrong, there are some positives that I could say about the animation, such as how colorful it is. On paper, the character designs do look pretty good, and the action sequences are awesome, even though that transformation sequence with Robot Boy does get old very fast. My problem with the animation in this show is a similar problem that I have with the animation in Ollie's Pack. Some aspects are well done, but the rest of it is really bland, particularly the color choices. Most of it is either white, green, gray, or blue, and there's not much to really write home about in terms of the backgrounds. Looking pretty blocky and basic. And while the character designs in this show do look good, at points, they can look way too similar to something like Dexter's Laboratory or Fairly Odd Parents. And this show has some of the laziest excuses for crowd shots that I've ever seen, to the point where it makes me question, was this for budget reasons? I mean, this show doesn't really feel like it should be that expensive to make, because the character designs do look simple, and not much really happens in this show until the action kicks in. Or was it due to the action sequences? I have no idea.
But when they do have a shot of the crowd, it's so obvious that all they had to do was add in a simple background and just put circles around it. And sometimes they would even copy and paste the same exact crowd shot with different colors. I mean, just look at these shots. This is the crowd from Robot Love. And now here is the crowd from Robolympics. Yeah, you're not fooling me here, people.
I know that drawing characters can be time-consuming, I should know because I'm an artist myself, but could they have not tried to come up with background extras or put together a group of people to design them? I mean, A Bug's Life was able to do that, and that was in CGI. However, the absolute worst example in this regard is once again the episode that I mentioned a little bit ago, The Curse of Truckenstein, because of this baffling shot right here, that is constantly showing at the beginning and at other points in the episode. It's so obvious that all they did was make make a 3D stage and put a bunch of circles on it. And I also noticed a bunch of shortcuts that this show took, with the fact that they constantly use that transformation sequence with Robot Boy, and in the episode Wrestling with Gus, there were certain moments where it switched over to flash animation out of nowhere, when not many exciting things even happen in this show anyway. And these things where nothing happens in certain episodes to begin with. And this was a show that was done in hand-drawn animation, for the record, which is a misconception that was brought up about this show. People like Mr. Enter thought that it was flash animated when it's actually hand-drawn. And in Wrestling with Gus, when it switched over to flash animation, it was extremely jarring. And I don't think that this show should be that expensive to make, considering the very simple designs. And around the time that this show was airing, other similarly simple design shows did put their all into the extra elements of the animation. Fairly Odd Parents was able to do that. Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends was able to do that. Why couldn't this show do that? Did that transformation sequence with Robot Boy take up most of the animation budget? Well, that can't be the case, considering the fact that this same animation is used in every episode.
If you ask me, Sean, they just simply don't give a shit.
And the last critique for this show, before we get to some of the things that we like about this show, is the humor.
Oh boy, the humor.
I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything. The humor in this show is absolutely horrendous. It's very coincidental that throughout this review, I've been comparing this show to Ollie's Pack, which was a show that in one part, I compared to Monster Family, otherwise known as Happy Family. Because this show's idea of humor is directly on par with that movie. The jokes in this show are completely non-existent, to the point where it feels like this show isn't even trying to be funny. Nothing made me laugh whatsoever. And whenever the show does make an attempt to make you laugh, every single joke that they try to go for feels like they were thought up in a few seconds because they thought of some of the most overused jokes imaginable.
For example, ha ha ha, look at Constantine being oblivious towards the fact that Chemicals is being strangled by a snake. Was that supposed to be funny? Because I'm not laughing.
And the jokes in particular are so unenergized and draggy that they just fall flat on their faces.
That, or they go towards some of the most bottom-of-the-barrel humor you could possibly imagine.
I ain't kidding you when I say that, starting from the episodes Metal Monster and Roughing It, a good 75% of this show revolves entirely around Grossout humor. And I'm not just talking about the average Grossout humor, like characters farting or whatever. This show in particular goes for the most extreme form of Grossout imaginable, to the point where, I'm not even joking, I think that the original Ren and Stimpy has more dignity than this show. I know that there's Traffic Slam, where Gus constantly gets carsick and throws up a lot, but there are so many other examples of how bad this show can get with its Grossout. I'm not even kidding when I say that the episode Roughing It has 2 Grossout moments in a row.
It's like they're deliberately trying to mock us while disgusting the people watching this show, so they decide to give us some disgusting humor to rub it in our faces.
That leads me into speculating that it suspiciously feels as if this show is deliberately trying to make me and others cringe, and considering a lot of the other triggering and anger-inducing aspects of this show, that is a high possibility.
It wouldn't surprise me.
The ending of the episode Foot Brawl has Special Agent get covered in what's in a porta potty. And considering what is in a porta potty, you guys probably know what I'm talking about. And the worst example of them all, Robo-Monkey Shines, which is another one of my least favorite episodes of the show because of the fact that it's the most disgusting. Dwight literally has an entire trailer full of poop that the episode goes way too far with. That makes me glad that this show's animation isn't extremely detailed, because on screen, it doesn't look that gross, but in context with the characters saying what these things are, I would cringe while watching as opposed to feeling queasy. And also, this is a question that I have for the episode in particular, even when I initially watched the episode when marathoning it in preparations for this review. Tommy, why did you think that using the chip from Donnie's old computer was a good idea? You know exactly the kind of person that Donnie is. He was going to look up things to prank people with.
Remember, Dr. Mishimo thought it was a great idea to give that kid a job to take care of Robot Boy without any questions whatsoever. The show is like a never-ending spiral of complete stupidity.
There's also the series finale, which we'll be getting to in a little bit. In another quarter of the Grossout, when it isn't using actual poop or barf, they're basically using material that would make you feel unclean, as in most of what is shown in this show feels extremely fetishy. Small Problems literally has an advertisement in its own universe that allows kids to cover themselves in their favorite Jell-O flavors.
Ew!
And a lot of the other episodes, more often than not, have characters getting covered in something, or have certain characters drenched in something like paint or mud throughout most of the episodes. That just becomes kind of uncomfortable to watch, like you're watching someone's fetishes on screen. And the other 25% of the show's humor is, I kid you not, just watching characters farting on screen, and they have absolutely no shame about it whatsoever. And I know this for a fact, considering the fact that most episodes have Gus laughing at the fact that he farted, making Tommy and Lola become repulsed by him doing that. And one episode called Ooh, That Smell is an episode that consists of nothing but fart and poop jokes that, what I described with how the other 25% of the humor consists of fart jokes, is entirely encapsulated in this one episode.
These people have issues. Seriously huge, concerning issues.
And here and there, this show does try to throw in humor for the adults, similarly to a lot of other cartoons from the time period that this show came out, but due to the fact that this show is horribly written, and it doesn't know how to properly execute jokes to make them land, the adult jokes that they try to do in this show is not very good. They aren't properly thought out, and they are incredibly unsubtle, to a point where when it gets to each joke where they try to throw in something for the adults, you can see what this joke is implying all over it.
So, is there anything you like about this series, Sean?
Well, as I said with the animation, there are some positives that I do have with that. Debbie Turnbull is somewhat of a likable character, and there are some episodes that I do like the episodes Kama Spazi and Chop. But other than that, I'm having a really hard time thinking about anything I really liked about this show. As stated before, every single aspect of this show feels like it was specifically trying to aggravate me and many other people that have a low tolerance for these things. The absolute scumminess that is the way that Gus treats Tommy, the ways that this show treats family as if having a brother that beats you up and a father that puts the brother on a pedestal and doesn't care about your safety as not being a problem whatsoever, the absolutely inconsistent writing that flip-flops character motivations in its own rules, the absolute uncomfortableness that is this show's disregard towards personal space, the irritating and bland voices, the Grossout that can get so bad that it makes you wonder if this show is deliberately trying to make you cringe, and among so many other things, made this show legitimately painful and grinding to sit through.
Yeah, even more than sitting through this review. No offense, Sean.
And it's not because I went into this show being stressed out or whatever, and even when I got absolutely furious with this show, it didn't affect my enjoyment of other shows. I thought that while I was watching Making Fiends that it was the case, but that's not actually true because after I watched Making Fiends, I watched Puka in preparations for my review on that, so it's just that this show was actually painful.
Okay, anything else?
Oh, there's also the series finale to talk about shortly, though there must be something that I'm missing, considering the fact that this show has a cult following. Even if I were to look past all the severe flaws with this show is still not good. Just like Ollie's Pack, even if you were able to scrape off all the problems with this show is extremely boring and bland. It doesn't even have any aspects that are so bad that it's good. Nearly every single episode of this show has at least one of these aspects that I listed above, making it absolutely god-awful. Where the only way that makes this show less bad is if you watch this show with someone and point out all the flaws with it, and have a good time with that person. And admittedly, me and you had a blast pointing out all the things that are wrong with two of the episodes, Kindergarten Chaos and Robot Girl. But once again, if you're able to stomach through all of that, there's just nothing here.
And you know what? An incredibly painful and stupid show with loads of bad characters and disgusting, cringy humor. It's no surprise that the whole show ended on a huge whimper. Like this.
Oh yeah! Before we get on to the final verdict, we might as well talk about the series finale real quick. The final episode of the show is called Mama's Boy. Basically, this episode revolves around Dr. Kamikaze visiting his mom, and that's basically it. Gus and Tommy do show up in the episode halfway through for a school funding thing, and they do show up at Dr. Kamikaze's mom's house as a visitor or something, but that's pretty much it.
Oh, and there was this running gag throughout the whole episode where Dr. Kamikaze steps in dog poop, and he says, "Ah, bad dogs!"
Basically, it's your run-of-the-mill bad episode of Robot Boy. The plot of the episode is very bare bones, with that really gross running gag adding an extra layer of bad to an already cliche and bare bones episode. But the thing that makes this episode worse in hindsight is that this is the series finale to the show. And I was genuinely shocked when I found out that this was the case, because in marathoning each episode of the show, I didn't marathon the series in the order of how Wikipedia or how the episodes are organized in the episode order. I watched them in the order of how the YouTube playlists organized them on the YouTube channel, and had no idea how the order actually went, and then later on found out that this was the episode that the show ended on.
See guys, I told you it ended on a whimper.
If I were being completely honest, if this show were to end out on a regular episode, like Eek the Cat or the Flash animated seasons of Puka, I wouldn't even care. But this show actually did go out on a really sour note. Not because they ended the series with certain characters being in a really sticky situation, like Mandora Saves Christmas from Thundercats Roar, or Bonfire of the Vanity from the Clutter segments of Eek the Cat, but instead, they decided to not do something meaningful or go out with a shred of dignity, with the fact that Dr. Kamikaze and Constantine are still doing the repetitive formula, and all throughout the entire episode, the way that the show decided to go out, decided not to go out with any dignity or whatever. Instead, they decided to go out by constantly doing a running gag with Dr. Kamikaze constantly screaming, "Bad dogs!" at the dogs that belong to his mom. And right at the end, has Dr. Kamikaze being hit in the head with a wooden spoon. That's pretty much it.
That's literally how the entire series ended. I don't care if the show had plans, and I know the writing is pretty bad, but they really couldn't come up with a better idea than to just have the main stupid villain get hit with a wooden spoon. Seriously? Seriously?
I won't say that this finale ended out on the biggest sour note, because unlike Mandora Saves Christmas from Thundercats Roar, it doesn't end on an unpleasant note. This episode is one of the worst finales of the shows that I have and will review in Sean's Network reviews so far. So, in terms of shows that were reviewed in Sean's Network reviews so far, is this show the worst? Well, considering the fact that by the time that this review is being made, I said that Thundercats Roar is worse than this show, and I still stand by it. Don't get me wrong, Robot Boy was much more painful to sit through, as this show has 52 half-hour episodes, Thundercats Roar has only 26 half-hours, and both shows do have a similar level of offensive things in them. Thundercats Roar is slightly worse, because even though that show also had offensive things in it, like how it handled death as a joke and how disrespectful it was towards the King of Thundera, King Claudius, that show knew about everything that it was getting itself into, yet they decided to do all those things anyway, making that show much more insulting, while the things that Robot Boy did were purely accidental, for the most part. Not to mention, Thundercats Roar is much more assaulting to your senses, as there's more noise and the characters barely stay still for a second, making that show much more annoying and headache-inducing, while this show has annoying voices, and that's it. So on that front, it's not as bad as Thundercats Roar. But how does it compare to the other two shows reviewed in this series that I don't like, the Tom and Jerry comedy show and Ollie's Pack? There's no doubt in my mind that this show is worse than Ollie's Pack, because even though this show has a lot of similar problems as that show, Robot Boy went to the levels where they legitimately added offensive content, like family abuse and abusive friendships, but saw absolutely nothing wrong with those things. While Ollie's Pack didn't go to the point where they added those triggering things, the worst thing that the show did was that Ollie did despicable things and it was incredibly unpleasant. And with the Tom and Jerry comedy show, at first this decision was a tough one. While this show isn't as boring as that show, as I went along and started getting more frustrated with this show, it got up to a point where I said that I would rather watch the Tom and Jerry comedy show than this, because Robot Boy was much more painful to sit through. And the worst thing that the Tom and Jerry comedy show did was that it told bad jokes, inflicted inflicted pain onto Tom for no reason, and it did the classic cat and mouse duo dirty. Meanwhile, with Robot Boy, it has two of the things that I mentioned with the Tom and Jerry comedy show, but with the addition of the portrayals of family and friendship, its Grossout, its disregard towards the concept of personal space and obnoxious voices makes for a much more painful experience. Gem? Gem? Gem!
I love you, my lady!
Hey Gem, do you have your own final verdict to say about this show? After the final verdict, this would be the point where I would give out recommendations on whether to watch this show or not.
Okay, I know I haven't spoke a lot. Seriously, I'm tired. You want me to just spit it out and get it over with?
Yeah?
Okay, my thoughts. Even though I haven't seen all of the episodes of the show, I don't need to in order to truly understand what the show really is. All of the characters are either stupid and unlikable, the comedy is stupid, cringy, and gross, it's incredibly inconsistent with the rules that it presents us and never follows through with it, and honestly, it's just not that great of a cartoon show. Now, I will admit this. Robot Boy did have the potential to be a modern hit. It really could have. It's not like Coconut Fred Fruit Salad Island, whatever the f*** it's called, where it had no chance and it's obviously catering to the SpongeBob franchise. But seriously, Robot Boy could have been decent. It could have been great. But it fails on many, many aspects. I wouldn't say it's a terrible show, like top 10, bottom of the barrel, really terrible, completely avoid this show, like the plague material, but it's still pretty bad, all things considered, and I wouldn't recommend this, and I would seriously not show this to my kids. It's not that great. If you like it, good for you. I don't care. Keep it away from me. Go play with for all I care. Thumbs down for Robot Boy, and I really don't like this show. That's it. I'm done.
That's all you have to say?
I just told you that I'm done, but yes, I am.
Okay. If we didn't make this clear by the tone of this review, my recommendation for this show is to avoid this show like the plague. There are much better shows out there that, while they aren't perfect by any means necessary, they will leave you feeling much more satisfied and won't leave you feeling angry, baffled, or unclean. As I said before, while this show isn't the worst show reviewed in Sean's Network Reviews, it's definitely in the top 3 for sure. If you want to watch a show that is this show done right, watch Teacher's Pet and My Life as a Teenage Robot instead. They do something with their premises to make those shows enjoyable. They have likable and interesting characters, and while those shows could be considered generic and generally have people debating on whether they're good or okay, they're much better written and don't have disgusting excuses for characters like Gus. And being quite honest right now, I'd rather watch Johnny Test than this show. Because even though that show did get ridiculed for its overuse of sound effects, and it also used every concept in the world for an animated series, that show at least didn't use triggering and serious topics and treat them as if it's not a problem, and the voices were much more tolerable, as well as the fact that it did start off okay for its first season. It wasn't great, but it was a standard first season that would determine whether it would get better or worse. And Coconut Fred Fruit Salad Island is better than this show, because that could at least be considered as a so bad it's good show, and the most that it did was rip off SpongeBob. I won't say that Robot Boy is the worst thing that Cartoon Network acquired, but it is definitely top 5 material, and Robot Boy is definitely going to be a candidate for a top 10 worst forgotten cartoons list if I ever get around to doing one in the future. And it's one of the worst cartoons reviewed in Sean's Network Reviews so far.